$1,000 sat on the cleared table. No one watching. No camera pointing that direction. The woman who forgot it was a billionaire who had rushed out for an emergency meeting. To her, pocket change. To him, a single father working tables. It was more money than he had ever held at once. Tuition for his son. Rent money. Enough to stop begging for extensions on every bill. He could slip it into his pocket. No one would know. But what if she came back? And if he kept it, what kind of man would he become? Nathan Cole wiped down the corner booth for the third time that morning. The lunch rush had passed, leaving behind crumpled napkins and the faint smell of grilled chicken. His lower back ached from 5 straight hours on his feet, but he kept moving. Standing still meant thinking, and thinking led nowhere good. He had worked at Henderson's Grill for 4 years, long enough to know every stain on the floor and every crack in the leather seats. The restaurant sat on a busy street downtown, sandwiched between a law office and a coffee chain. Glass windows stretched across the front, letting in harsh afternoon light that made the worn furniture look worse than it was. Most customers were business people grabbing quick meals between meetings. They rarely looked at their servers. Nathan had learned not to take it personally. He was there to refill water glasses and clear plates. Nothing more. His phone buzzed in his apron pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from his son's school. Payment reminder. Tuition for next semester was due in 2 weeks. $375. Nathan had saved $112 so far. He deleted the message and shoved the phone back into his pocket. The math never worked. No matter how many shifts he picked up, the numbers refused to line up. Rent took most of his paycheck. Groceries took the rest. Tips were supposed to cover everything else, but they barely covered gas. Lucas was 8 years old and still believed his father could fix anything. Nathan wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. The boy had started asking questions lately. Why did they move so often? Why couldn't they get a dog like his friend Tommy? Why did Dad always look so tired? Nathan answered with jokes and promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Someday, they would have a bigger apartment. Someday, they would take a real vacation. Someday, things would be different. The front door opened, and Nathan looked up. A woman walked in alone, moving with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your place in a room. She wore a dark blazer over a white blouse, tailored pants, and shoes that probably cost more than Nathan made in a month. Her hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She carried a leather bag and a phone that she glanced at every few seconds. Nathan grabbed a menu and approached. The woman barely looked at him as she slid into a booth near the window. She set her phone face up on the table and kept one hand near it. Nathan recognized the type. High-powered executive. Always working. Always somewhere else in her mind. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice even and polite. The woman glanced up briefly. "Sparkling water. No ice." Nathan nodded and walked to the bar. He filled a glass and brought it back. The woman had already returned to her phone, typing rapidly with both thumbs. He set the glass down gently and pulled out his notepad. "Ready to order? Or would you like a few more minutes?" he asked. She looked up again, this time with a trace of impatience. "Grilled salmon. No sauce. Side salad. Dressing on the side." Nathan wrote it down. "Got it. Anything else?" "That's all." He took the menu and headed to the kitchen. The cook, a thick-shouldered man named Ray, grunted when Nathan clipped the order to the line. Ray had worked at Henderson's longer than anyone, moving through tickets with mechanical efficiency. He never talked much, which Nathan appreciated. Small talk felt like wasted effort when you were barely keeping your head above water. Nathan returned to the floor and checked on his other tables. An older couple finishing coffee. 2 men in suits arguing about a contract. A young woman scrolling through her laptop. Normal afternoon crowd. He refilled drinks, cleared plates, smiled when appropriate. The routine kept his mind occupied. 15 minutes later, Ray rang the bell. Nathan picked up the salmon plate and brought it to the woman by the window. She was on a phone call now, speaking in clipped sentences. Nathan set the plate down quietly and stepped back. She didn't acknowledge him. He walked away. The restaurant settled into its usual mid-afternoon lull. Most tables had emptied. Nathan cleaned the coffee station and restocked napkins. His shift ended in an hour, but he had already agreed to cover the dinner shift for someone else. Extra money. Extra hours. Same tired cycle. The woman's phone rang. Nathan heard it from across the room. She answered immediately, her voice sharp. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Something urgent. Something that couldn't wait. She stood abruptly, still holding the phone to her ear. She grabbed her bag and walked toward the door without looking back. Nathan watched her leave. She hadn't touched most of the salmon. He walked over to clear the table and stopped. Next to the plate, partially hidden under a napkin, was a stack of cash. He moved the napkin aside. 10 bills, $100 bills, $1,000. His breath caught. He looked around instinctively. The restaurant was nearly empty. The couple in the corner booth was paying their check. The men in suits had left. The young woman with the laptop had headphones in. No one was watching. Nathan picked up the stack and felt the weight of it in his hand. Real money. More than he had held at once in years. His first thought was rent. He was 3 weeks behind, and the landlord had stopped accepting excuses. His second thought was Lucas. Tuition. Winter coat. New shoes that actually fit. His third thought was the phone bill he hadn't paid in 2 months. The overdue notice from the electric company. The constant, grinding pressure of never having enough. He looked toward the door. The woman was gone. She had rushed out so fast she probably didn't even realize she had left the money. To someone like her, $1,000 might be nothing. Pocket change. The cost of a nice dinner or a pair of shoes. She wouldn't miss it. She might not even remember it. Nathan stood there with the cash in his hand. Feeling the smooth texture of the bills, his heart pounded. No one knew. No one had seen. He could slip it into his pocket right now and go back to work. The woman wouldn't come back. Why would she? People like her didn't return to places like this to retrieve forgotten money. They moved on. They had assistants to handle small problems. But what if she did come back? What if she remembered and called the restaurant? What if she accused him? He could lose his job. Worse, he could be arrested. They would call it theft. It wouldn't matter that he found it. It wouldn't matter that he needed it. He would be the guy who stole from a customer. Nathan's hands trembled. The money felt heavier now. He thought about Lucas waiting for him at the neighbor's apartment after school. The boy would ask how his day went, and Nathan would smile and say it was fine. He always said it was fine. But holding this money, he could actually make things fine. He could pay the rent. He could buy groceries without checking his account first. He could stop lying to his son about why they couldn't afford things other kids had. He looked at the bills again. 10 crisp hundreds. No one would know. The thought repeated itself, louder each time. No one would know. Just this once, he could catch a break. Just this once, the universe could give him something instead of taking. But another voice cut through. Quieter, but persistent. What kind of man keeps money that isn't his? What kind of father teaches his son that desperation justifies dishonesty? Nathan had told Lucas 100 times that doing the right thing mattered, that honesty mattered, that people were measured by their choices, not their circumstances. He stood frozen, trapped between two impossible options. Keep it and solve his problems, return it and stay broke. Either way, something inside him would break. Nathan folded the bills and slipped them into his apron pocket. Not a decision, just a delay. He would figure it out. He just needed time to think. He grabbed the plate and walked toward the kitchen, his legs moving automatically while his mind spiraled. The weight in his pocket felt like an anchor pulling him down with every step. Nathan dumped the uneaten salmon into the trash and stacked the plate with the others. The kitchen was loud with clattering dishes and the hiss of the grill. Ray glanced at him but said nothing. Nathan kept his head down and his hand away from his apron pocket. The money was still there. He could feel it even without touching it. He walked back to the floor and checked his other tables. The older couple had left. The young woman with the laptop was packing up. The restaurant felt emptier now, quieter. Nathan appreciated the space. It gave him room to think, except thinking wasn't helping. Every thought led back to the same place, the money. What it could do. What it would cost. He pulled a white envelope from behind the register and slipped into the storage closet. The cramped space smelled like bleach and old mops. He locked the door and pulled the cash from his pocket. 10 hundreds. He counted them twice to make sure. $1,000. Enough to change everything. Enough to ruin everything. Nathan folded the bills and slid them into the envelope. He wrote nothing on it. No name. No explanation. Just a sealed envelope with money inside. He would give it to the manager later. In an hour, maybe 2. He just needed time to settle his nerves. Time to convince himself this was the right choice. He tucked the envelope into the inner pocket of his apron, separate from the cash pocket where he kept tips. This way, it felt different. Protected. Not his. When he came back out, a new customer had taken a seat at the counter. A man in a delivery uniform, eating quickly between stops. Nathan poured him coffee without being asked and moved on. The routine steadied him. Clear tables, refill drinks, smile, repeat. The envelope pressed against his ribs with every movement. His phone buzzed again. Another text from the school. This one included a bolded line at the bottom. Final notice. Payment required by Friday, or Lucas would not be permitted to continue attending. Nathan stared at the screen until the words blurred. Friday was 4 days away. He had $112 saved. He needed $263 more. He deleted the message and forced himself to keep moving. One of the servers, a young woman named Jenna, passed him carrying a tray of drinks. She smiled briefly, distracted by her own tables. Nathan liked Jenna. She worked hard and didn't complain. She had 2 kids at home and a husband who had walked out 6 months ago. She understood what it meant to keep going when everything hurt. The front door opened. Nathan looked up automatically. The woman from earlier walked back in. She moved faster this time, her eyes scanning the restaurant. Nathan's stomach dropped. He froze near the coffee station, his hand gripping the counter. The woman walked straight to the booth where she had sat earlier. She looked at the table, then at the floor around it. Her expression shifted from calm to confused to frustrated in seconds. She turned and walked toward the register where the manager stood reviewing receipts. Nathan couldn't hear the conversation from where he stood, but he saw the woman gesturing toward the booth. The manager, a thin man named Paul with graying hair and permanent worry lines, listened carefully. He nodded several times, then shook his head. The woman's posture stiffened. She said something else, more insistent this time. Paul glanced around the restaurant. His eyes landed on Nathan. Nathan felt his blood go cold. Paul motioned for him to come over. Nathan forced his legs to move. Each step felt heavier than the last. The envelope in his apron seemed to burn through the fabric. When Nathan reached the register, Paul gestured toward the woman. She looked directly at Nathan for the first time. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. Nathan kept his face neutral. "This is Nathan," Paul said, his tone careful. He was working that section this afternoon. The woman studied Nathan for a moment before speaking. Her voice was calm but firm. "I left something at my table, a significant amount of cash. Did you see it when you cleared?" Nathan's throat tightened. He could feel the envelope against his chest. He could feel Paul watching him. He could feel the weight of the next words before they even left his mouth. Tell the truth now, and he would look guilty, like he had been planning to keep it. Tell a lie, and he would be a thief. Either way, he lost. "I cleared your table," Nathan said slowly, "but I haven't had a chance to turn anything in yet." The woman's expression didn't change. Paul's eyes narrowed slightly. Nathan reached into his apron and pulled out the envelope. He handed it to the woman without opening it. She took it, broke the seal, and counted the bills quickly. All 10 were there. "It's all here," she said, more to herself than to them. She looked at Nathan again. "Why didn't you report this immediately?" Paul crossed his arms. The question hung in the air. Nathan felt the walls closing in. The truth was too complicated, too shameful. He had kept it because he needed it, because for a few minutes he had let himself imagine what it would feel like to not be drowning. "I wasn't sure if it was a tip or if you had forgotten it," Nathan said, the words coming out flat. "I put it in an envelope so it wouldn't get mixed up with anything else. I was going to bring it to Paul after my shift." Paul's expression hardened. The woman tilted her head slightly, unconvinced. Nathan could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe him. Not completely. And she was right. Not to. He had hesitated. He had considered keeping it. That hesitation made him guilty, even if he had done the right thing in the end. "Next time, report it immediately," Paul said, his voice tight. "We have a lost and found for a reason." Nathan nodded. The woman slipped the envelope into her bag and looked at him one more time. Her gaze was colder now, distant. She thanked Paul and walked toward the door. Nathan watched her leave, feeling something crack inside his chest. Paul waited until the door closed before turning to Nathan. His face was a mixture of disappointment and suspicion. Nathan had worked for him for 4 years. 4 years of showing up on time, covering shifts, never complaining. But all of that meant nothing now. One moment of doubt had erased everything. "We'll talk about this later," Paul said quietly. "Get back to work." Nathan returned to the floor. The delivery driver had left cash on the counter. Nathan cleared the plate and wiped down the space. His hands moved automatically, but his mind was somewhere else. Replaying the conversation, replaying the woman's face, replaying the feeling of handing over money that could have solved every problem he had. Jenna approached the coffee station where Nathan was standing. She refilled her water pitcher and glanced at him. Something in his face must have shown because her expression softened. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Nathan nodded. He didn't trust his voice. Jenna didn't push. She filled her pitcher and walked away. The kindness in her eyes made it worse. She would have understood. She lived the same life he did, paycheck to paycheck, always behind, always scrambling. But she wouldn't have kept the money either. Nathan knew that. She was better than he was. The dinner shift started slowly. A family with 2 young kids, a couple on a date, a group of college students splitting appetizers. Nathan moved through his tables with mechanical precision. He smiled when expected. He made small talk when necessary. Inside, he felt hollow. He thought about Lucas. The boy would be at the neighbor's apartment by now, probably doing homework at the kitchen table. Mrs. Donovan, the neighbor, watched him most afternoons. She charged $20 a week, which was far less than any daycare. Nathan paid her when he could. She never complained when he was late. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Donovan. Lucas was asking when he would be home. Nathan replied that he would be late tonight. Extra shift. The lie came easily now. He had been lying to his son for years. Small lies, protective lies, lies that said everything was fine when nothing was. The restaurant filled up as the evening progressed. Nathan stayed busy. Busy meant less time to think, less time to feel the weight of what he had almost done. But even in the chaos of taking orders and running food, the envelope haunted him. The moment he had slipped it into his apron, the moment he had considered keeping it. Paul stayed near the register all night, watching the floor more closely than usual. Every time Nathan passed him, he felt the judgment. Paul had trusted him, the restaurant had trusted him, and he had broken that trust by hesitating. It didn't matter that he had done the right thing eventually. The hesitation was the crime. Around 8 o'clock, Nathan took his break in the alley behind the restaurant. The air was cold, and the dumpster smelled like rotting food. He leaned against the brick wall and closed his eyes. His body ached. His feet throbbed. His head pounded. This was his life. This would always be his life. No amount of found money would change that. No lucky break would save him. He thought about the woman. She had walked out of the restaurant without a second thought. Her $1,000 returned. Her life unchanged. She would go back to her office, or her penthouse, or wherever people like her went. She would forget about this within an hour, but Nathan would carry it forever. The shame of wanting something that wasn't his. The shame of being so desperate that he had actually considered it. The back door opened, and Jenna stepped out. She pulled a pack of cigarettes from her apron and lit one. She didn't offer one to Nathan. She knew he didn't smoke. They stood in silence for a moment, both staring at the alley wall. "Rough day?" Jenna asked, exhaling smoke. Nathan almost laughed. Rough didn't begin to cover it, but he nodded. Jenna took another drag and flicked ash onto the pavement. "Paul's been watching you all night," she said. "What happened?" Nathan told her. The whole story. Finding the money, keeping it, returning it. Jenna listened without interrupting. When he finished, she dropped her cigarette and crushed it under her shoe. "You did the right thing," she said simply. Nathan looked at her. "Doesn't feel like it." Jenna shrugged. "It never does. That's how you know it was right." She went back inside, leaving Nathan alone in the alley. Her words settled over him like a weight. The right thing. He had returned the money. He had been honest. But it hadn't saved him. It hadn't paid his rent or his son's tuition. It hadn't changed anything except making him feel like a fool. He stayed outside a few more minutes, letting the cold air numb his face. When he finally went back in, the restaurant was packed. He threw himself into the work. Orders, dishes, tables. The noise and movement drowned out his thoughts. He didn't think about the money. He didn't think about Lucas. He didn't think about tomorrow. He just moved. At the end of the night, after the last customer left and the kitchen had closed, Nathan counted his tips. $47. Enough for gas and maybe groceries. Not enough for anything that mattered. He folded the bills and slipped them into his wallet. Paul was in the office doing paperwork. Nathan knocked on the doorframe. Paul looked up. His expression was unreadable. Nathan stood in the doorway, waiting for whatever came next. A lecture, a warning, maybe worse. "Go home, Nathan," Paul said finally. "We'll talk tomorrow." Nathan nodded and left. The words felt like a threat. Nathan arrived at the restaurant the next morning with his stomach in knots. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman's face, the way she had looked at him when he handed back the envelope, like he was something she needed to watch carefully, like he was already guilty. Lucas had asked him at breakfast why he seemed so quiet. Nathan had forced a smile and said he was just tired. The boy had accepted the answer and gone back to his cereal. 8 years old and still trusting. Still believing his father had everything under control. Nathan didn't know how much longer he could maintain that illusion. The restaurant was quiet when Nathan walked in through the back entrance. Morning prep crew was in the kitchen, but the dining room was empty. Paul's office door was open. Nathan could see him at his desk, reviewing something on his computer. Nathan took a breath and knocked on the doorframe. Paul looked up. His expression was hard to read. Not angry, exactly. more tired than anything else. He gestured for Nathan to come in and close the door. Nathan did, feeling the walls of the small office press in around him. "Sit down," Paul said, nodding toward the chair across from his desk. Nathan sat. His hands rested on his knees. He kept his back straight, his eyes forward. Paul leaned back in his chair and studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. "I've been thinking about yesterday," Paul said finally, "about what happened with that customer and the money." Nathan nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak yet. Paul folded his hands on the desk and leaned forward slightly. "You've worked here 4 years. Never had a problem with you. Never had a complaint. You show up on time. You do your job. But yesterday," Paul trailed off, shaking his head. "Yesterday made me question things." The words hit Nathan harder than he expected. 4 years of reliability erased by one moment of hesitation. He wanted to defend himself, to explain the crushing weight of debt and desperation, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say that would matter? That he was broke? That he was scared? Everyone had problems. Not everyone considered stealing. "I returned the money," Nathan said quietly. "All of it. I didn't take anything." Paul nodded slowly. "You did. Eventually. But you didn't report it right away. That's the problem. When you find money that doesn't belong to you, you report it immediately. You don't put it in your pocket and think about it." Nathan felt his chest tighten. Paul was right. He knew Paul was right. But hearing it said out loud made the shame burn hotter. He had thought about keeping it. For those few minutes in the storage closet, he had calculated what that money could do. He had let himself imagine a way out. "I'm sorry," Nathan said. The words felt inadequate. They changed nothing. Paul rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than usual. "I have to think about the restaurant," Paul said. "About our reputation. If word got out that one of our servers pocketed a customer's money, even for a few minutes, it would destroy us." Nathan's stomach dropped. This was it. He was getting fired. 4 years gone. No reference. No way to explain to the next employer why he lost his job. He thought about Lucas waiting at school, unaware that his father's life was falling apart. Again. "But," Paul continued, and Nathan looked up. "You did return it. You didn't have to. You could have walked out with that money and never come back. But you didn't. That has to count for something." Nathan didn't know what to say. He waited, barely breathing. Paul straightened some papers on his desk, clearly working through his thoughts. "I'm not firing you," Paul said, "but I need you to understand how serious this was. One mistake like that, and everything you've built here means nothing. Trust takes years to earn and seconds to lose." Nathan nodded. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with something darker. He wasn't fired, but he wasn't forgiven either. He would carry this with him, every shift, every time Paul looked at him, every time he cleared a table and found something left behind. "Thank you," Nathan said, his voice rough. "It won't happen again." Paul nodded. "Get to work. We open in 20 minutes. Nathan stood and left the office. His legs felt weak. He went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, lines around his mouth that hadn't been there a year ago. He was 34, but felt 50. The morning shift started slowly. A few regulars came in for coffee and breakfast. Nathan moved through his routine, but everything felt different now. Every customer who left cash on the table made him hyper-aware. Every time he cleared a booth, he checked 3 times to make sure nothing was left behind. The paranoia sat on his shoulders like a weight. Around 11, the front door opened. Nathan looked up from wiping down the counter and felt his heart stop. The woman from yesterday walked in. Claire Whitmore. He knew her name now because Paul had mentioned it during their conversation that morning. She wore a different suit today, navy blue instead of black, but she carried the same leather bag and the same expression of controlled intensity. She walked directly to Paul at the register. Nathan couldn't hear their conversation, but he saw Paul's face change. Surprise, then confusion, then something that looked like relief. Paul glanced toward Nathan and gestured for him to come over. Nathan's mouth went dry. What now? Had she changed her mind? Was she pressing charges? Nathan walked to the register, his footsteps feeling too loud against the tile floor. Claire turned to look at him. Her expression was unreadable. Paul looked between them, clearly uncertain about what was happening. "Ms. Whitmore wanted to speak with you," Paul said carefully. "I'll give you both some privacy." Paul stepped away, moving to the other end of the counter, but staying within sight. Claire looked at Nathan directly. Her eyes were sharp, but not cold. Something had shifted since yesterday. "I owe you an apology," Claire said, and Nathan's mind went blank. Of all the things he had expected her to say, that wasn't one of them. "Yesterday, when I came back for my money, I was suspicious of you. I assumed the worst. That wasn't fair." Nathan didn't know how to respond. He stood there, waiting for the rest. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. She held it but didn't hand it over yet. "I spoke with your manager this morning," she continued. "He told me you've worked here for 4 years, that you're reliable, that you have a son you're raising alone. He told me you turned in my money without being asked." Nathan's throat tightened. Paul had defended him. After everything, Paul had actually defended him. The realization hit harder than he expected. "I run a tech company," Claire said. "We're always looking for people with integrity, real integrity, not the kind that only shows up when someone's watching. What you did yesterday, returning that money when you clearly needed it, that's rare." She held out the business card. Nathan took it slowly. It was thick, expensive paper with minimal text. Claire Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer, a phone number, an email address. "I can't promise anything specific," Claire said. "But if you're interested in a different kind of work, call that number. Ask for me directly. We have positions in facilities, management, security, administrative support. Things that pay better than this." Nathan stared at the card. His hands were shaking slightly. This didn't make sense. People like her didn't come back to help people like him. This didn't happen in real life. "Why?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire's expression softened slightly. For the first time, she looked less like a distant executive and more like a person. "Because yesterday, I was angry about losing money. But then I thought about what it must have taken for you to give it back. I make that $1,000 in about 20 minutes. For you, it was probably more money than you see in a month, maybe longer. And you still gave it back." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "I believe in rewarding honesty. I don't see enough of it. Call me if you're interested." She turned and walked toward the door. Nathan stood frozen, the card gripped in his hand. Just before she reached the exit, she stopped and looked back. "And for what it's worth," Claire added, "your son is lucky to have you." She left. The door closed behind her. Nathan stood at the register, staring at the card. Paul came back over, his expression somewhere between confused and impressed. "What just happened?" Paul asked. Nathan shook his head. He didn't have words yet. He looked down at the card again, making sure it was real. The paper felt solid in his hand. The text was clear. This was actually happening. "She offered me a job," Nathan said, still not quite believing it. "At her company?" Paul's eyebrows shot up. "Are you going to take it?" Nathan thought about Lucas, about the tuition payment due in 3 days, about the rent and the phone bill, and the constant grinding pressure of never having enough. He thought about what he had told his son 100 times, that doing the right thing mattered, That honesty mattered, that people were measured by their choices, not their circumstances. "I don't know," Nathan said honestly, "but I'm going to call." Paul smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "You should. You deserve a break." Nathan slipped the card into his wallet next to the $47 in tips from last night. It wasn't much, but it was something. A door that had been closed his entire life had cracked open. Not because he was lucky, not because he was special, but because when it mattered most, he had chosen to be honest, even when it hurt, even when it cost him everything. He went back to work, clearing tables, refilling drinks, smiling at customers. The routine was the same, but something inside him had shifted. The weight on his shoulders felt lighter, not gone, but manageable. For the first time in years, Nathan let himself believe that things might actually get better, not because the universe owed him anything, but because he had proven to himself that he was the kind of man who deserved better. Kindness, he realized, wasn't measured by what you kept. It was measured by what you gave back when no one forced you to.